Good morning. Welcome to episode 2 of the UHY Cast. I'm delighted this morning to be joined by John Leach, founder of Winning Pitch, and someone that over the last few years I've got quite close to, having helped him through his exit of Winning Pitch. Good morning, John.
Morning, Dave. Thank you
doing?
for inviting me. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Retirement treating you well?
Semi-retirement, in between jobs.
In between jobs. Looking better than ever, John.
Thank you.
So, as our listeners and viewers may have picked up from the previous episode, what we're looking to do is to bring some inspirational people onto the show, and for us to ask some questions and hopefully give you some interesting sound bites and insights into different people's lives and business experiences. So, just starting from the beginning, John. Could you perhaps give us a little bit of insight into your childhood and going back to school and what you kind of thought life was all about when you look back on those years?
Yeah, it's going back quite a long time this now, Dave. I'm 58 this year, so I'm digging deep into the memories. So brought up in a working class family in Bury. Mum's Italian, my dad was English. My mum came over when she was 17. Brought up in a very loving environment, in an environment where progression was very much promoted by our parents. I think my dad's goal was to get both his lads to university, which he succeeded in. I've always been a bit of a dreamer, always dreamt about the next big thing, where do we go? Even as a kid, constant dreamer. My dad always used to say, you're a dreamer and you're like a bull in a china shop, which probably sums up my life, really. But started to calm down as I got older. Traditional sort of education, O levels, I think it's GCSEs now.
I think so, yeah.
A levels, where I just had this absolute fascination with chemistry, and went to Manchester University and studied chemistry for 3 years.
That just blowing things up.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it was one of. I always believe that life's driven by passion, and my passion for chemistry. I went to Manchester Uni, studied there for 3 years, and when I graduated, there was a couple of options: do I do a master's, or do I go and work in a lab? And that's when the passion actually started to deconstruct.
Right.
I ended up as an analytical chemist for a paint company, which lasted about 2 weeks. I thought, this is not where I want to be. This is not what I want to do. My dad was mortified. What are you getting rid of that white coat for? I said, no, Dad, I can't do this. And so I'd sort of developed this aptitude for business. I guess it's the sort of the creative bit of me and the bull in the china shop part of me, where I always wanted to investigate and explore new opportunities. I guess that's the bit that I learned from chemistry was it's about experimentation and discovery. And so that's where probably at about 24, I give up that old sort of that career in chemistry and started getting involved in research from sort of new starts, getting involved with businesses from so it was almost like a technical researcher with a couple of startups. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years. Got married at 24, year after uni.
Wow.
Child on the way, year after.
No messing.
3 girls later, a granddad now. I'd, over sort of a period from about 24 to just short of 30, involved in sort of the research activities of various businesses, and also started to develop a number of interests which were quite diverse, but they're all focused on, I guess, to put it rather crudely, making money, because you've got 2 kids, very traditional family, in terms of mum looks after kids, dad goes out to work. And that was a very traditional sort of upbringing, probably largely based upon how I'd been brought up. And it worked for us in that, you need to make ends meet. So you had to go and find, just doing work I got involved with all sorts of things. We're importing kids' clothes worth from Cyprus and Greece and flogging that. buying properties with my brother, flogging them. I also got into, this is quite a weird one, art and antiques. So I got to know Lowry's publisher. So we started to sell a lot of Lowry prints.
Wow.
And I was actually earning more with stuff on the side. I think they call it side hustle now, don't they? I think they call them side hustles now. I was actually earning more with side hustles than I was in my main job, albeit I was balancing the two. But, with a growing family, you have to, sort of necessity, innovation is, what is it, which way around is it? Necessity is the mother of innovation. And so that drove a whole raft of ideas and, business propositions to basically generate money. I even wrote one lad's final year thesis. He was doing a management degree. I wrote that for him and I charged for it, which I don't know whether I should admit that, but at the time, that's you need to make ends meet. So following that, I then sort of got involved with a company, a very young startup company just around the corner from here, and bought my way into that company over a period of about 15 years.
Right, okay. And how did you come across that opportunity?
I applied for a job in the Daily Telegraph, which I wasn't qualified to do. And so I always thought, well, you give it a go. If you don't give it a go, you don't get anything. And got on with the MD, with the chairman there. He's still a big friend of mine. And the chairman, the MD, the lady Janet, very good friends of mine. And we grew that business to just short of about 15 million.
So you got the job that you weren't qualified for?
Yeah. That's
amazing.
Again a bit of a chance, really.
No, absolutely.
Well, it's bullying a China. You've got to take risk.
Yep.
If you don't grab those opportunities, then don't be surprised if somebody else grabs them. So worked with that company, became business development director and shareholder of that business. And I guess at the heart of it, I guess I'm a salesman. That's what I do. I sell stuff. Mm-hmm. And over sort of a period of the last 15 years, took a very, very keen interest in entrepreneurial mindset, strategic selling, growth, and again, this is where the nerdy chemist comes back into it, where I started to think, well, actually, if you can start to understand and unravel the attitudes and the behaviors and the approaches of successful people, if you can model that, you can actually then start to create frameworks to actually support others do it. And having lived this sort of journey of, taking a business from what was best part of nothing to about 15 million, I'd lived and breathed it myself as business development sales director, and then observing other people that formed part of my peer group, I started to write and I started to document what I'd observed in terms of the behaviors of these very successful people. So I've written 2 books on the subject. One was on strategic selling, and how you go about a strategic sale, but how you do it in an ethical way. My philosophy has always been, if somebody doesn't want it, you walk away. And that's been the basis upon which I've built everything I do now and everything I've done it previously, is that, you've got to approach things from an ethical stance. Always do the right thing, always operate by best intention, never do. I'm a great believer in karma. What goes around comes around. It's a bit touchy-feely, but I think it's true. So I wrote one book on strategic selling and the sort of the drivers of high growth selling, what that involves, what that entails. So that was called Pitch Perfect a long time ago. I think that was like 2006, 2007. And then that was followed then by another book called Success Factor, which was the attitudes, behaviors and mindset of high-performing individuals from an entrepreneurial stance. So this was all observational, based on observation. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any what I would call fundamental or elementary research to this. It was based purely on observation and what I'd seen. And these 2 books allowed me then to create frameworks, tools, techniques, templates, 2x2 matrices, all of which I then packaged into training and coaching programs. And this was the birth of Winning Pitch, essentially.
Brilliant. It's interesting how you reflect back to those university days and the chemistry side of things, and even just listening to you talking there, you're breaking things down into individual elements. And I think a lot of people sometimes reflect back on their uni days and remember all the social sides and the beer drinking and partying, and actually don't really realise how much of an impact it can have on you from an academic perspective, and whether that be the degree you did actually forms part of your career, or whether actually it's the fundamentals of what you learned. Really interesting. So you were in that high growth business, getting it to 15 million turnover. Talk us through kind of what happened with that, and then obviously you mentioned Winning Pitch there, which is obviously the huge success that I've been aware of and known about in more recent years. But how did that initial job and business kind of come to an end, and Winning Pitch start?
Well, I think what happened there the previous businesses is where you've got a group of shareholders who are at different points in their life. So, two of the shareholders were very much about looking out towards the beach. I was still looking at, over the battlefield. So I think what happened there was agreement that the business would be sold, and it was sold to a FTSE 250 business. I learned a lot about that acquisition. I probably lasted a couple of months after the acquisition because it just didn't feel right for me.
So you transitioned as part of the transaction initially?
Yeah. All, agreement with the new owners. I had a particular passion around growth, around sales, around high performance, around people, and that was what I was going to do. And in fact, one of my first contracts was with the company that acquired us, doing some work with their teams around, ambition, progression, strategic selling, ethical selling. So they were one of my first contracts, and that was, using these frameworks and tools that I developed to actually then promote and take the business forward through IP. I'm a great believer in intellectual property. Service-based businesses that don't have intellectual property, I don't think carry value. So I think you've got to have some intrinsic value within your business that actually, it's almost like service packaging. So you can put a wrapper around it in terms of this is the core of what we do. It's 7 steps, 3 steps, toolkits, guides that drive, the intellectual property strategy of your own business. So Winning Pitch was very much built upon IP, copyrighted materials, trademark materials. The book, the 2 books that I'd written were very much a great platform upon which to build the business. So it was a hook to put what we did, to hang what we did on a hook, and so that's. And I'm still, and again, I guess this is the chemistry bit coming through again. Anybody that knows me will know that I always carry around a little black moleskin, and that's my lab book. And I've been doing this for the last 20 years. And in fact, if you look at the front of this book, this is book 171.
Wow.
This is how sad I am. I've had a cabinet made that fits them all. And I can look back to this day 10 years ago, what I was thinking, what I saw, what I observed. So note-taking, journaling, is a key driver of creativity, which drives IP, which drives new ideas, which drives new thinking. So that has been embedded within, because ultimately when we come to put the for sale sign up, having IP, I think, brings value.
Yeah, absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. And just going back to those early days of founding Winning Pitch and getting it off the ground, obviously you've come out of quite a large business at that point. It's been through a sale process. You've decided that it's not for you. Just talk us through those early days of founding your own company, going out looking for those first few clients, some of the challenges that you perhaps faced, some of the demons that you had that were questioning you in the back of your mind, because ultimately a good salesperson can probably walk into another job the next day. How was that part of your life?
I think the key to this is, I think if you've worked for yourself for a good number of years, walking into a corporate environment it doesn't work in my experience. It's very, very hard to take someone who's done their own thing for many years and put them in a corporate framework, which is why I left and did my own thing, because I wanted to manage, my own paycheck. I wanted to be able to write my own paycheck. And very often in the early days, there was no paycheck to write. There was paychecks for everybody else, but no paycheck for me. I was fortunate in that, I'd had some funds from the sale that allowed me to not worry about 3 kids for a good number, for at least a few years, in terms of, and that always became a driver for me. Is this is really quite bizarre. This is where I go a bit off piste here. But my youngest daughter Molly had this little Barbie case on the top of a wardrobe, and I knew if that wasn't coming down, she wasn't going on holiday. So it was my driver was that Barbie case. And I saw it in the loft the other day and I thought, that took me back. I wonder if I can put that in the discussions with Dave when I see him next week. And it was that Barbie case that become the driver. It's because everything's anchored in my family. So what I do is anchored by my family. So driving, driving revenue, funds, value creation, it's all such that my family are comfortable. There's that personal driver as well. Obviously, you want that sense of achievement.
Sure.
But ultimately, without that base and that soul and that core of your family, for me, that's what made me work long hours, smile when I didn't want to smile. That was, and anyone who's set up their own business and tried to grow their own business will know that it's not all about red Ferraris and Porsches. It is sometimes about struggle. It's about having the resilience and the mental toughness to be able to say, well, I'm going to get through this. And so I guess the early days for me was all about, I always saw my role as being out there and selling stuff, selling what we did. What the biggest challenge for me was what sat behind what I was saying, able to deliver that. And I was very fortunate that I had a great group of people that supported me and understood me and who would get where I was coming from in terms of, it's all about selling. We always have this phrase, NTS, nail that sale, which become it's bit cheesy, but big poster on the wall, NTC, but only if it makes a difference. And so I had great people who could deliver the messages I was selling. So 80-90% of my time was out selling, 10% delivery. Mm-hmm. I used to, my bit was getting up there, waving my arms about, talking to people about what we do. But then a fantastic group of people behind me that really delivered, who cared.
And the winning pitch business, obviously, it was set out to assist high growth businesses and give them that support and mentoring and guidance. Yeah. And was that predominantly from your personal networks that you'd picked up over the years that you leveraged? Was it looking for national contracts? When you kind of put that business plan together, what was the overall goal to enable you to grow that business and get those sales?
I guess the key thing for us was that we couldn't grow a business just selling what we do to SMEs, because there's not enough traction, there's not enough money in the pot to pay for what we did. So the strategy that I pursued was one of targeting public sector long-term contracts, almost from an outsourcing point of view. So what I mean by that is 3-5-year contracts with government, local government and central government, whereby essentially, in basic terms, there'd be a lump of money allocated from a local authority or a public sector group, so hundreds of thousands up to millions, and then what they'd do is they'd go to tender to say, right, okay, we want a company to take this budget and identify X number of businesses, take them through a process, but then you will be judged on where you've taken that business in terms of its own growth. And that was the strategy that we pursued, because I thought, I always set up the business with a view to sell it at some point in the future. And the only way you sell it, in my view, would be if you could show and demonstrate a 3-year order book, a 3-year, your business plan is almost nailed on for 3 years.
Yep.
And that's the strategy that we'd pursued, such that you could almost forecast over a 3-year period what your revenue was going to be and your profit was going to be, if you had the mechanisms in place to deliver on those targets. And that's what gave us the growth. So we won contracts even in the early days. We won contracts which we'd only been going 2 years. We won a £10 million contract, which was then the Northwest Development Agency.
And I think that's where we actually met, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's where we met. Yeah, and it was about it's that bit of belief in what we did. We had the case studies and the referencing to be able to say this stuff works. It really does work. If there's a number of platforms in place and foundations in place within a business, this stuff that WP does actually work.
Yeah.
And it just went from there.
And then in the latter years of your ownership of Winning Pitch, can you just kind of talk us through how you shaped the business and the kind of the management structure you had in there? Because obviously it was all about people, and delivery of those projects for businesses and local authorities. So what did the team look like at that kind of as you shaped it towards that kind of mindset of an exit?
I guess I've always run or tried to run the business with a mantra of run your business today as though you're ready to be invested in or sold tomorrow, which means having platforms in place. And one of those key platforms is your team. So over a period of probably three years, I tried to divorce myself from the business, such that when we got to a point further down the line where we were in front of potential buyers, I just said 30 seconds and nothing else for the rest of the conversation. I'd worked for that. Now, some people thought I was lazy, but what they didn't realise is this was all thought through. If I was the chairman, I'd moved towards a position of where I was able to say, well, these guys run the business. So what I was able to put in place was a strong MD who would manage the business day to day.
Yeah.
Strong FD, HR, business development, and performance management. So it's having these, so for me, it was almost like, it's like flying a plane. There's loads of dials on the dashboard. And I just used to look at the dials on the dashboard every day. So the performance was real time. So I knew where we were on certain projects. So as the captain of the plane, I was able to say, well, that's not looking good. We need to do something about that, without interfering, but saying,
sure, nudging
it along. So at board meetings, there was the key dials were there, and weekly I'd be looking at these dials. But the whole purpose of that was removing myself from the business, because, to be very blunt and very frank, is that if I'd have been still being fundamental to that business, most of my money had come out on the further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is your area, and but obviously, if you're seen to be a key part of that business, customer relationships, well, you're going to
diminishing value.
Yeah, and so there's no value.
Yeah,
however much IP you've got. So I made a concerted effort to do that, and it was strategic intent over a 3-year period that we would do that.
And what was the moment that you decided, right, now's the time for me to explore an exit? Because it's obviously a big thing when you've set something up from scratch and it's all you've lived for a number of years. Yeah. You've got some amazing people within it. I appreciate you had your plan, and as you say, you were the pilot of the plane, should I say. What triggered in your mind to say, right, actually now I want to properly explore looking at an exit?
I guess there's a number of issues that some are strategic and some are pretty random. So when I wind it back to when we sold the business, when we started to, when someone flicked the switch, you start to think, well, approaching mid-50s, there's other things I want to do.
So much shooting you can do there.
Got my chickens, got my sheep, got my cows. There's other things. There's other things I want to do. I want to do with life. My kids were growing up. Two of my girls are married. One still not married. And you start to look at life through a different. I think you start to get to your mid-50s, you start to look at life through a different set of glasses. So that was a bit of an underlying emotional, personal driver, and there's things that me and Wendy wanted to do, and wanted to do now the kids would get older that we couldn't do when the kids were younger. And so that was a bit of a driver. The business was doing well. Gone through a bit of a downturn pre-2018, 2019. Then so you start getting to 2020, 2021, it actually started to pick up.
Yeah.
We'd had a number of the building blocks in place. And then I had lunch with you in Piccolinos. This is the random bit. And I come away from that meeting saying to Jim, God, he's hungry, that lad. He's hungry, that Dave Kendrick. And you said a lot of things in that meeting about your connectivity, your process. And I thought, well, I think we need to take a closer look at this. So mixture of personal things and you, really.
Very flattering, very flattering. You definitely had too much Amarone that day. And obviously the business was eventually sold to Newable, a substantial business in the UK. And by all accounts, it's been a fantastic acquisition for them. Do you have moments where you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, have I done the right thing? Do you have any regrets? Or do you feel that actually you got timing right and it's allowed you to do those things you've not been able to do for the years and get a few more chickens and a few more sheep?
Well, I think part of the one thing I've probably not really emphasised was, and we spoke about this at the time, was about an elegant exit. So to have an elegant exit, obviously you need the balance between elegant exit and value.
Of course.
And for me, there was when we looked at the offers that had come forward, I was looking at, well, what's the cultural fit? What provides the elegance of exit? And it's always that balance of getting that right. And I think for me, passing it to Newable, good souls, good people, great cultures aligned, not collided, which I think you find, you'll know this better than me. In a lot of acquisitions, cultures collide.
Absolutely.
They don't align. And I know it sounds a little bit fluffy, but it's so true.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, if it's all going wrong at the negotiation, what's going to happen when you've done the sale?
Yeah.
It's just going to decay exponentially. The relationship's going to decay exponentially. So for me, that elegant exit was really so important that we found a partner, and so that allows me to. Some morning I do miss it, yeah. I come into Manchester this morning, I do miss it.
It's only because it's half term.
But there's bits I don't miss as well. Retendering contracts, all the challenges that come with growing a business. Those are the bits I don't enjoy.
Sure.
And I speak to colleagues, my peer network, and you listen to them, and it's the same challenges that they face. And a lot of people now ask for my advice around exiting a business, and I think many of the businesses and a lot of the people I speak to sleepwalk from one financial year to another one without putting the platforms in place. And you do need that business plan. It sounds a bit academic, but you do need that business plan, and you have to hit your numbers.
Yeah.
You have to have a growth story. You have to have a really good team. You have to have a strong position in the market. You need to get your housekeeping right and your governance right, because otherwise, when you get to the table and somebody's pouring over your business, they'll find out if these things are wrong.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And again, I always think, and I look at this startup community, I look at the growth community, And I think that everybody that starts a business or tries to grow a business needs to speak to a corporate finance advisor. Now, you've not asked me to say that in any way, shape or form, but it's only till you get to due diligence you realise what selling a business means. It can be painful. It can be emotionally consuming. It usually is. And so being prepared for that journey, if you're raising private equity or investor money, you still go through the same process.
Of course, yeah.
You still have to fill in the same, questionnaires and tick the right boxes. Solicitors have a great way of finding things that you didn't realise existed. And so you need to be ready for that. And a lot of businesses are just not ready for it.
No.
So they turn up and they try and sell, and it's a bag of washing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's that preparation bit. And, people say, yeah, our housekeeping is great. Our governance is great, but it's only 60% great. Yeah. When you get to due diligence, it has to be 100% great.
Especially if you want the big money.
If you want the big money, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, potentially what somebody's doing is buying a liability if it's not right. So, fundamental issues, shareholder agreements, leases, all the stuff that is boring to a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business people, actually it comes on to roost if you don't get it right early days.
Yeah.
And that's where I was fortunate with the team that I had. We'd all the checks and balances were in place. So when the due diligence came, it was actually quite reasonably a smooth process.
No, it was very well organised. I remember.
Yeah, it was a well organised process. And there's those questionnaires that you give us at the start around your market, your customer, the things that you're going to be asked. Every business should have one of them and run their business to that questionnaire. Yeah. Because that's what's good. If you want to raise some private equity, a VC, whatever, invest the money or sell, if you can't tick those boxes and answer those questions, although your answers are a bit flaky, don't be surprised if somebody walks away.
Yeah.
It's as fundamental as that, and it's having that realistic view on what your business is worth.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, John. So an amazing career, still young in yourself. You've got 2:00 dates with your chickens to feed. What's next for the John Leach chapter?
I'm still in the process of discovery. I'm still writing my little black book. There's still plenty of paint in the brush. So I'm looking at other opportunities which are a little bit, how can I put it, less demanding on people, demanding on time of others. So quite into the art world, and I've got a keen interest in northern artists. So maybe an opportunity will emerge out of that.
Brilliant. Interesting.
It's not selling eggs, put it like that.
Not selling eggs, no. Although everybody needs eggs.
Everybody needs eggs. They're up there, they're £5 a dozen now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Must be posh ones, already.
Yeah, the very posh ones.
Okay, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thank
Amazing story. I think some really useful snippets for people to take away and reflect on how they run their own businesses. As with these episodes, I've got to ask you 3 questions at the end, which we ask everybody. So the first one is, when you were at school, what did you want to be? Well,
my dad's best mate was a superintendent in the police, and he was head of Greater Manchester Police Dogs. I remember him taking me down to the training centre down in Chorlton as a kid. Superintendent, I said, my dad's mate, and I saw these dogs in action. I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a police dog handler. But then I found the love of chemistry.
A bull in a china shop with a police dog. That's quite a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And if there was one thing in your career you could change or do differently, what would that have been?
I guess early days, I'd have listened more to trusted advice. I guess one thing through the process of growing a business is you take advice, and it's not always good advice. And sometimes advice can cost money if it's not right. And I'd fell foul to that on a few occasions. And so for me, it's having taken trusted advice, not finding my new best mate and believing what they said, And so for me, I think it's important for other people out there trying to grow a business is having a trusted network of people that what they say is actually said with best intention. It's not done with intention of trying to get a contract or a fee. It's done with best intention. So I think, early days I probably didn't surround myself with the best advisors and trusted advisors. And that's one of my big things at the minute, and I'd always say if people ask me for advice or networks, I would only point them to people that I trusted, or I would trust with what they had to say. So I think early days, as I say, I think if I'd have spent a little bit more time trying to find really, really solid advice rather than the first person that said they could help me, and just listen more to that. But then as you grow older and as you get a bit wiser, you start to sort out the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
Got it wrong with you, but never mind.
Thank you. And final question, I'm really intrigued as to what the answer is going to be to this one. So you're hosting a dinner party. You can have 4 guests. Who would your guests be?
I think I referred to the fact that I love art and Northern art, and there's a number of people that come to mind there. There's Ellis Lowry, as the principle in Northern art. But then I love Impressionism. This didn't come from Berry, but Claude Monet is another one that I love. I can't think of. I mean, the third one it would have to be my wife, because she wants to meet them as well. So that's. There's an empty seat at the plate. Maybe you could come as well, Dave.
Oh, thanks. I'm always up for a free dinner.
There you go.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's great to see you looking so well. Hopefully that's been of real interest to everybody who's logged in. Without further ado, we'll be on to our 3rd episode very shortly. And I just want to say thanks again, John, and all the best.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Cheers.
Cheers, Dave. Thank you.